Hey everybody, it's Kate, the West Coast Paper Crafter, and you are joining me for my Otterly Adorable Card Class at Home project number 1. I'm just going to adjust the camera, and we are going to get started with the first project in this series. So if you have the Otterly Adorable stamp set and dies and paper, then you'll be able to create your projects exactly how I show them. And if you don't, that's okay. Use whatever you have in your stash and follow along. So I'll start out with the measurements. Now, if you are watching this on YouTube, you're going to find the measurements in the description of the video. If you are watching on Facebook, there will be a photo comment with all the measurements in the comment section. All right, so to start out, we have a Balmy Blue card base. This is 5.5 by 8.5, and I've scored it at 4 1/4 on the 8.5 inch side. I've got a Lost Lagoon layer that is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. A piece of the Designer Series paper from the Otterly Adorable Suite, and this is 4 by 5 1/4. And then for the sentiment, I've got a piece of Calypso Coral. Now I used a nested essential die to cut this out. If you don't have those dies, then you'll just want to cut your paper to 2 1/8 by 1.5. And then for the white, this is 1.5 by 1 1/16 if you don't have the nested essential dies. All right, and then I have already pre-cut these otters from the Otterly Adorable Designer Series paper. So if you have the dies, you can use the dies to cut these images out from the paper. And if you don't, then you just go ahead and fussy cut them. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is glue down our Designer Series paper. And my glue bottle is empty. Craft fail. That's all right. I always have a backup. This one happens to be my reserve bottle for fine gluing, but it always will work in a pinch. So I'm just adding some liquid glue. And of course, if you prefer Stampin' Seal or tear and tape, then you do you. All right, so I'm just going to glue this Designer Series paper down onto the Lost Lagoon layer. So there's just going to be a very slight border, about 1/16 of an inch. All right, so once you have that, then this is just going to be glued onto the front of the card. Now, the first project is very simple. It is mostly just stamp, ink, and paper with a little bit of the Lost Lagoon soft cording. All right, so I'm just going to add this layer right to the front of the card. And there will be about 1/16 of a border around the edges of the card base as well. All right, so there is the front of the card. Now, I'm going to stamp the Love You Lot sentiment on the basic white cardstock. And I'm just going to stamp that up closer to the top of this little rectangle. So I'm going to stamp in Lost Lagoon ink. And I'm not stamping in the middle. I'm going to stamp more to the top. And then I've taken the little goldfish stamp from the Otterly Amazing Stamp Set, and I'm also going to stamp that right on the sentiment piece in Calypso Coral. I'm just going to grab a scrap piece of paper because I'll be stamping off the edge of this little piece of paper. All right, so I'm just going to ink up my goldfish in Calypso Coral, and I'm just going to stamp them right underneath the sentiment, like so. All right, now of course I'm going to close up my ink pad, otherwise I will get ink everywhere if I haven't already got it on my fingers. And then the next step we're going to do is glue down that white rectangle onto the Calypso Coral rectangle. All right, so once I've got that centered, I'm going to flip that over, and I'm going to add some tear and tape to the back side of this sentiment piece. And pull the backing off. And then I'm taking some of this Lost Lagoon soft cording, and I'm just going to add it to the back side of the sentiment in a figure 8 pattern. And I'll use the back of that, or the sticky side of that tear and tape, just to hold that cording in place while I adjust it to exactly how I want it. All right, one more loop, I think. That's pretty good. Once I have it where I want it, then I'm just going to add one more layer of tear and tape to hold that cording in place. And it's okay if it's thick, because I'm going to pop this piece up. All right, so this is going to, I'm going to put this just in the middle, but to the right. So not directly in the center of the card, but middle of the card, but off to the right. And then I'm going to take my die cut otters and just kind of get an idea where I'm going to put them on the card. And then I'll commit. All right, so this first otter, I am going to glue him or her down to the front of the card. And the other otter, I think I'll pop up with dimensionals, but you can do it however you prefer. All right, so I'm just going to put this fellow right about there. Okay. Now I just wanted to cover just a little bit of that otter. I just wanted to tuck him underneath that sentiment piece. So I'm going to go ahead and put my sentiment down. Now I'm pretty generous with my dimensionals, because I just like to have that sentiment piece nice and firm and not having any sag in the middle, if that makes sense. All right, so this is going right there. All right, so this otter, I'm going to give him some dimension and pop him up on the card. Now his tail is a little bit too narrow for a full-size dimensional, so I'm just going to use a mini dimensional on the end of his tail, or hers. And if you don't have mini dimensionals, then you can just cut a dimensional in half and it should work just fine. All right, and the last little otter, I am going to glue right on the sentiment. Okay, there we have it. Project number 1 of the Otterly Adorable card class at home. I hope you enjoy it and stay tuned for projects 2 and 3. Thanks for tuning in.